Earth was a world of chaos, a place where survival was never guaranteed. From scorching deserts to frozen wastelands, from deadly predators to microscopic viruses, everything on Earth fought for dominance. This was not a planet for the weak. It was a death world, a place so dangerous that most alien species refused to set foot on it. But for humans, it was home. It shaped them, hardened them, and made them into something that terrified the rest of the galaxy. Other species evolved in peaceful environments, where nature was kind, but humans? They evolved in the middle of storms, earthquakes, and endless wars. They learned to fight, to adapt, and most importantly, to survive. And now, the galaxy was about to see just how dangerous they could be. The Gusterian Empire controlled dozens of star systems, ruling through fear and power. Their soldiers were stronger, their ships were more advanced, and their technology was unmatched. At least, that's what they believed. But when they invaded a small human colony near the edge of known space, they made their biggest mistake. Humanity didn't run. They didn't beg. Instead, they planned. Earth's leaders knew they couldn't fight the Gusterians in open war. Not yet. The enemy had numbers and firepower, but humans had something else: the ability to do the impossible. Instead of a full-scale attack, they sent a small team of operatives to strike where it would hurt the most. Their target? Guster V, the enemy's most heavily fortified stronghold. If they could take it down, the entire Gusterian supply chain would collapse, and the war would shift in humanity's favor. Captain Riker led the team. He was a man forged in fire, a soldier who had fought in the worst battles and lived to tell the tale. His squad was small, only 12 elite operatives, but each of them was worth 100 ordinary soldiers. They weren't just trained in combat, they were trained to think, to improvise, to adapt. That was the human advantage. The Gusterians relied on predictable strategies and overwhelming force, but humans, they used whatever worked, even if it was reckless. Even if it was insane. The mission was simple in theory, but nearly suicidal in execution. They would infiltrate Guster V disguised as workers, hack into the main control systems, disable the defenses, and call in reinforcements. But there was one problem: no one had ever escaped from Guster V alive. The journey to the enemy stronghold was tense. The team blended in with a transport ship carrying supplies to Guster V, wearing stolen uniforms and keeping their weapons hidden. Every moment felt like a ticking bomb. The Gusterian guards were everywhere, their cold, reptilian eyes scanning for any sign of deception. One wrong move, one suspicious glance, and it would all be over. But humans were good at pretending. They'd spent centuries lying, bluffing, and outsmarting their enemies. As the ship docked, they moved in like ghosts, blending with the workers, their hands steady, their minds sharp. The first phase of the mission had begun. Inside, Guster V was a fortress of nightmares, titanium walls, energy barriers, and security drones watching every corner. The entire planet was a war machine, built to crush any resistance. But humans had studied every blueprint, every security pattern, and they knew where to strike. Moving through the facility, they planted small explosive charges at critical points, setting up for the final attack. Time was running out. If they were discovered before they completed the setup, there would be no second chance. Then, everything went wrong. One of their own, Lieutenant Harris, was a traitor. The moment the charges were armed, he activated an alarm, alerting the entire base. He'd been working for the Gusterians all along, feeding them information in exchange for safety. But he had underestimated his own team. Before he could escape, Riker shot him without hesitation. There was no time for anger, no time for regret. The enemy was coming, and now the mission had changed. The team wasn't just here to disable the base anymore. Now, they had to survive. The alarm screamed across the halls as Gusterian soldiers flooded in, weapons ready. The battle was brutal, fast, and merciless. Humans didn't fight fair. They used every dirty trick, every unexpected move to their advantage. Smoke grenades, hacking enemy comms, using the narrow hallways to force close combat, anything to keep the enemy off balance. The Gusterians fought with precision, but humans fought with desperation. And desperation was always deadlier. Explosions ripped through the facility as the planted charges detonated, sending shockwaves across the planet. Systems crashed, power grids failed, and chaos spread like wildfire. The once mighty fortress of Guster V was now falling apart from the inside. But the humans weren't safe yet. Reinforcements were on their way, and Riker led the charge. The team sprinted through the collapsing structure, dodging enemy fire, leaping over fallen debris, and gunning down anything in their way. Every second counted. As they reached the hangar, they saw what they were looking for, a Gusterian dropship, fully fueled and ready to go. But between them and the ship stood the final obstacle, the Gusterian commander, a towering warrior with armor too strong for normal weapons. He wasn't just any soldier. He was a war beast, genetically enhanced and trained for one purpose, to kill. The fight was brutal. The commander was fast, strong, and nearly unstoppable. Bullets ricocheted off his armor, blades barely scratched his skin. But humans were notorious for one thing: they never stopped fighting. Riker lured the commander toward an unstable power core, baiting him into a final strike. At the last second, Riker dodged, and the commander's blade pierced the core instead. The explosion that followed sent shockwaves through the hangar, hurling the enemy back. The path was clear. With seconds to spare, the team boarded the stolen dropship, engines roaring to life. The doors sealed, the thrusters ignited, and with a deafening blast, they launched into space, leaving behind the burning ruins of Guster V. The impossible mission was complete. Humanity had struck fear into the heart of the Gusterian Empire. But this was just the beginning. The war had only started, and now the galaxy knew the truth: humans were not prey. They were the hunters. Captain Riker stood in the dimly lit war room, surrounded by holographic displays of Guster V. The planet was a fortress, guarded by impenetrable shields, heavy artillery, and thousands of enemy soldiers. A direct attack would be suicide. The Gusterians had ruled with fear for centuries, crushing every rebellion before it could take root. But humans were different. They didn't play by the rules, and they didn't believe in impossible odds. The only way to win was to strike where the enemy least expected. Riker and his team of elite operatives were tasked with an insane mission: infiltrate the heart of Guster V, disable the planetary defenses, and escape before the enemy even knew what hit them. The plan sounded ridiculous. Even the best strategists doubted it could work. But Riker wasn't interested in doubt. He only cared about victory. The team gathered around as Riker laid out the details. They would pose as laborers and technicians being transported to Guster V for maintenance work. The enemy relied heavily on automated systems, but even the most advanced technology needed repairs. Humans had studied the Gusterians long enough to know they despised manual labor, outsourcing it to lesser species. That was the weakness they would exploit. They had managed to secure false identification chips, stolen uniforms, and even modified breathing masks to pass security scans. It wouldn't hold up to deep inspection, but they didn't need it to. They just needed to get inside. Once they were in, they would have to move fast. The mission required them to split into 3 teams, one to plant explosives in the shield generator, another to hijack the main control room, and the third to create a diversion. Timing was everything. If even one part of the plan failed, they would all die. As the transport ship approached Guster V, tension filled the air. Every soldier knew the risks. There would be no reinforcements, no second chances. If they were caught, the Gusterians wouldn't hesitate to execute them on the spot. But fear wasn't an option. The only thing that mattered was completing the mission. As the ship docked, the team moved in silence, blending with the other workers. The security checks were fast but efficient. One wrong move, one nervous glance, and everything would be over before it even began. Riker kept his breathing steady as a Gusterian officer scanned his ID chip. The alien's slitted yellow eyes studied him for a moment, then waved him through. The rest of the team followed, slipping into the enemy base without raising suspicion. The first step was complete. Now came the hard part. The facility was massive, filled with towering machinery and endless corridors. Surveillance drones hovered overhead, scanning for any unauthorized movement. Every hallway had armed patrols, their rifles charged and ready. The team split up, each group moving toward their designated targets. Riker led the team heading for the control room. They walked with purpose, acting like they belonged. The key to infiltration was confidence. If they looked like they were supposed to be there, most guards wouldn't question them. But just as they reached the main security hub, something went wrong. The door was locked, which shouldn't have been the case. Their inside contact had assured them it would be open. Something wasn't right. Riker signaled his team to hold position as he pulled out a small device, a custom hacking tool designed to override enemy systems. He worked fast, fingers moving over the interface, trying to break through the lock before anyone noticed. But just as the door slid open, an alarm blared through the facility. The Gusterians had detected an unauthorized access attempt. The entire base went into lockdown. The element of surprise was gone. Now, it was a fight for survival. Gunfire erupted as enemy soldiers swarmed the corridors. The human operatives responded instantly, taking cover and returning fire with brutal efficiency. The confined space worked to their advantage. Gusterians were larger and stronger, but humans were faster and more agile. They moved like shadows, dodging energy blasts and striking with deadly precision. Riker led the charge into the control room, cutting down the guards before they could call for backup. His team secured the area, sealing the doors and hacking into the main systems. The base was massive, but every security function was controlled from this room. If they could take control, they could shut down the defenses and give the other teams a fighting chance. Meanwhile, the team at the shield generator was facing its own battle. The explosives had been planted, but enemy forces were closing in fast. They needed to detonate now or risk losing the opportunity. The leader of the group, Lieutenant Vega, made a split-second decision. Instead of escaping, he stayed behind to manually trigger the explosion. His final message was brief: "Tell Riker to finish this." A second later, fire erupted through the facility, sending shockwaves across the entire planet. The shield generator was gone. The impossible plan was working, but at a terrible cost. The diversion team had also completed their mission, creating chaos across the base. Fires raged, alarms blared, and confusion spread among the Gusterians. But reinforcements were already on their way. The humans had only minutes before they were overwhelmed. In the control room, Riker's fingers flew over the terminal, overriding enemy protocols and opening an escape route. The stolen ship was waiting in the hangar, but reaching it was another challenge. With no other option, they fought their way through, using the enemy's own defenses against them. The final stretch was the most dangerous. The hangar was heavily guarded, and the escape ship was locked down. As the team ran through the massive chamber, they were met with heavy resistance. Energy blasts lit up the air, and bodies fell on both sides. Riker saw the exit, but before he could reach it, a massive figure stepped into his path: the Gusterian commander. He was twice the size of a human, his armor resistant to most conventional weapons. This was not a fight they could win through brute force. Riker didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fallen soldier's grenade, pulling the pin and hurling it at the fuel supply tanks nearby. The explosion was instant, sending fire and debris in all directions. The shockwave knocked the commander off balance, giving Riker the opening he needed. He sprinted past, firing a final shot into the control panel to disable the lockdown. The ship's engines roared to life as the surviving operatives boarded. There was no time to mourn the fallen. No time for anything except escape. As they shot into space, Guster V burned behind them. The mission had succeeded. The impossible plan had worked. Humanity had struck its first major blow against the Gusterian Empire. But Riker knew this was just the beginning. The enemy wouldn't forget. They would come back, stronger and angrier than before. And when they did, humanity would be ready. Because humans never gave up. They adapted, they fought, and they won. The cold void of space surrounded the silent dropship as it drifted closer to Guster V, the most heavily fortified planet in the Gusterian Empire. Inside, Captain Riker and his squad of elite human operatives remained still, their weapons secured, their minds focused. The mission was clear: get in, disable the planetary defenses, and escape before the enemy could react. It sounded simple on paper, But in reality, it was a near-suicidal task. The Gusterians were ruthless, their technology far superior, and their security almost impenetrable. But humans had one advantage that no other species had: the ability to do the impossible. The plan had been set in motion weeks ago. Intelligence reports confirmed that a supply transport was scheduled to land at Guster V's main facility, carrying spare parts and maintenance personnel. Riker's team had intercepted the transport in deep space, eliminating its crew and taking their place. Their disguises were nearly perfect stolen uniforms, modified ID chips, and just enough forged documentation to pass basic scans. But they all knew that once they landed, it wouldn't take long for them. The radio crackled in Riker's earpiece. Approaching docking bay. "Final checks in place," whispered Vega, his second in command. Riker gave a firm nod to his squad. "This is it. No mistakes." The ship trembled slightly as it entered Guster V's atmosphere, gliding toward the massive industrial complex that controlled the planet's defenses. The docking bay doors opened, revealing towering metal structures, security drones scanning the incoming ships, and Gusterian soldiers patrolling the perimeter. It was a death trap waiting to be sprung. The moment the ship touched down, the squad moved. Each operative played their role perfectly, stepping out of the transport like they belonged. Their forged paperwork was checked by a Gusterian officer, a towering reptilian creature with yellow eyes that seemed to pierce through the disguise. Riker kept his breathing steady. The officer stared at them for a moment too long, suspicion creeping into his expression. Then, he waved them through. The tension remained, but the first step was complete. They were inside. Moving through the facility, the squad split into their assigned teams. Riker led the main assault group, while Vega and his team moved toward the shield generator. The last team, under Sergeant Lin, was responsible for planting explosives along critical power conduits to disable security systems. Every step deeper into the facility was another step closer to either victory or disaster. The corridors were filled with workers and guards, but the team kept their pace steady, acting like they were supposed to be there. Humans were good at deception. Then, everything went wrong. An alarm blared across the facility, red lights flashing as security doors slammed shut. Their cover had been blown. "They know we're here," Vega's voice came through the comms. "We need to move now." Riker didn't hesitate. He signaled his team and rushed forward, drawing his weapon as Gusterian guards stormed in. The raid had begun. Gunfire erupted as the humans engaged the enemy. The Gusterians had stronger armor, but humans had speed and precision. Riker's squad moved with deadly efficiency, using the environment to their advantage, sliding behind cover, using smoke grenades to blind the enemy, and hitting weak points with surgical accuracy. The narrow corridors turned into kill zones, the Gusterians struggling to keep up with the unpredictable movements of their human attackers. Every second counted, and Riker knew they had to reach the control room before reinforcements overwhelmed them. "Vega, what's your status?" Riker barked into the comms, dodging an energy blast before taking down another soldier. "Almost there," Vega replied. "Had to change routes, too many hostiles. Give me 5 minutes." They didn't have 5 minutes. More enemy troops were pouring in, the entire facility on high alert. If they didn't act fast, they would be trapped. Riker spotted an alternate route, an overhead maintenance shaft that led directly to the control center. It was risky, but risk was all they had left. "Lin, hold them off down here. We're taking the high ground." Lin nodded, throwing another explosive charge toward the advancing enemy before leading her team into position. Riker climbed into the shaft with the rest of his unit, moving fast through the narrow passage. Below them, the battle raged on. Bursting out of the shaft, Riker and his squad landed inside the control room, weapons raised. The technicians inside barely had time to react before they were taken out. Riker rushed to the main console, plugging in a hacking device. The clock was ticking. Come on," he muttered, watching the progress bar inch forward. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. The enemy was closing in. Then, the door exploded inward. A Gusterian commander stepped through, towering over the humans, his massive blade gleaming under the red emergency lights. Riker barely had time to react before the warrior charged. He dodged, rolling to the side as the blade sliced through the air where he had just been. The rest of the squad opened fire, but the commander's armor absorbed the hits. This was no ordinary soldier. This was a monster built for war. Riker grabbed a nearby stun baton, knowing conventional weapons wouldn't work. He ducked under another swing and jammed the baton into the commander's exposed neck. Electricity surged through the alien's body, making it stumble for just a second. But a second was all Riker needed. He grabbed a fallen soldier's rifle and fired point-blank into the commander's exposed joints. The beast roared in pain before collapsing. One less obstacle. "Riker, we've got a problem." Vega's voice came through. "Shields are down, but enemy reinforcements are incoming. We need extraction now." Riker checked the console. The defenses were disabled. The mission was complete. But they still had to escape. "Everyone, fall back to the hangar." "We're leaving." The squad ran through the facility, explosions rocking the structure as Lin's team detonated their charges. Fire and smoke filled the air as enemy forces scrambled to respond. The stolen transport ship was already warming up, its engines humming. But between them and the ship stood another wave of Gusterian troops. Weapons aimed .NO words were exchanged. The battle reignited, humans and aliens clashing in a desperate final fight. Bullets tore through armor, energy blasts scorched the walls, and bodies fell. Riker saw Vega go down, a plasma shot burning through his side. He grabbed his fallen comrade, dragging him toward the ship as the rest of the squad provided cover. The ramp lowered, and one by one, they made it aboard. "Punch it!" Riker shouted. The pilot didn't hesitate, lifting off as enemy fire chased them into the sky. The moment they cleared the atmosphere, Riker activated the hyperdrive. In a flash, they were gone. The mission was over. Guster V's defenses were destroyed. The impossible had been done. But as Riker looked at his wounded soldiers and thought about the friends they had lost, he knew this was just the beginning. The Gusterians would strike back. The war had only just begun. The cold silence of space was broken by the steady hum of the human warship Vanguard as it drifted near the shattered remains of an asteroid belt. Inside, Captain Riker stood before a holographic display, his eyes scanning the impossible mission laid out before him. The Gusterian fleet had regrouped faster than anyone had expected, and now a massive armada was stationed near a key strategic outpost Theta. If the humans didn't destroy the outpost now, the enemy would fortify it beyond reach, cutting off vital supply routes and dooming future operations. But the mission was suicide. The station was surrounded by a fleet 5 times the size of Vanguard's strike force. The odds of success? Almost zero. Yet humans had never cared about the odds. Riker turned to his crew. "We all know what's at stake. If we don't hit that outpost now, this war could be over before it truly begins." His voice was steady, but the weight of responsibility pressed on him. The soldiers around him, battle-hardened veterans, nodded, their faces determined. They had fought against impossible odds before. They would do it again. The plan was reckless. A small squad would breach the outpost using a stealth drop, disable the station's shields, and signal the fleet for an all-out assault. But the moment the shields dropped, every Gusterian ship in range would descend upon them. It would be a race against time. The countdown began. The Vanguard moved into position, its hull coated in a specialized material to reduce its energy signature. A single transport ship, barely the size of a cargo hauler, detached and drifted toward Outpost Theta. Inside, Riker and his team sat in silence, checking their weapons and gear. Each second brought them closer to the enemy stronghold. The tension was thick, but no one spoke. They had all accepted what was about to happen. As the transport approached, the station's docking beacon flickered green. The team had hacked into their security earlier, disguising the ship as a supply vessel. But deception wouldn't last long. The moment they stepped inside, the real fight would begin. The transport landed with a soft thud, and the airlock hissed open. Riker was the first to step out, his weapon concealed under a stolen maintenance uniform. The docking bay was busy, workers moving cargo, security drones scanning crates, Gusterian guards patrolling lazily. It was a false sense of safety. Riker signaled his team, and they split up, each moving toward their assigned objectives. Speed was everything. Vega and Lin moved toward the control center to disable the shields, while Riker and his strike team headed for the main reactor, planting charges to cripple the station. They weaved through corridors, avoiding security patrols, using stolen clearance codes to bypass checkpoints. Every corner turned without confrontation was a small victory. But luck never lasted long. Just as they reached the reactor room, alarms blared. Red lights flashed, and automated defenses powered up. Their cover was blown. "Move! Move!" Riker shouted as energy turrets came to life, spraying plasma bolts through the air. His team dived for cover, returning fire with quick, precise shots. Explosions rocked the corridors as Vega's team engaged enemies near the control center. The station was waking up, and soon the entire Gusterian fleet would know they were here. There was no turning back now. Lin's voice crackled through the comms. "We're almost through shields. We'll be down in 2 minutes." 2 minutes felt like an eternity in the middle of a firefight. Riker ducked behind a crate, firing at approaching guards. They were bigger, stronger, and better armored, but humans were faster, more unpredictable. His team moved like ghosts, slipping through gaps, using angles the enemy didn't expect. Gusterians fought with brute force. Humans fought with intelligence. Vega's voice came next. "Shields are dropping now." That was the signal. Riker pressed the detonator, and a deep explosion shook the station as the charges in the reactor ignited. Fire and smoke erupted through the corridors, and the lights flickered. The station was crippled, its defenses down. Outside, the human fleet received the signal and launched their attack. Vanguard and its warships burst from hiding, weapons blazing as they tore into the confused Gusterian fleet. The battle had begun, but Riker's team still had to escape. "Get to the evac point," he ordered, sprinting through the station as enemy reinforcements flooded in. The Gusterians were furious, their soldiers throwing themselves into battle without hesitation. The humans fought through, each step toward the docking bay paid for in blood. Vega was hit, a plasma shot burning through his shoulder. Riker pulled him up, dragging him forward. There was no time to stop. Survival meant moving forward. They reached the transport, bullets and plasma fire bouncing off its reinforced hull as the last survivors scrambled aboard. Lin slammed the controls, and the ship's engines roared to life. As they lifted off, Riker watched the station behind them, now engulfed in flames, the battle outside raging. Human ships weaved through enemy fire, taking down Gusterian warships one by one. Against all odds, they had done it. The transport shot through space, racing toward the fleet. Riker exhaled, his body aching, his mind still processing what had happened. He looked at his battered crew, the wounds, the exhaustion in their eyes. They had lost good people today. But they had won. And as long as humanity refused to bow, they would keep winning. No matter the odds, the battle was over. The human fleet had torn through the enemy lines, and Outpost Theta was now a burning wreck drifting through space. The Gusterian forces had been crushed, their warships scattered, their once mighty stronghold reduced to debris. On board the Vanguard, Captain Riker stood on the bridge, watching the wreckage on the holo display. His body ached, his wounds burned, but none of it mattered now. They had won. The crew around him cheered, their voices filled with relief and exhaustion. Some hugged, others simply sat down, too tired to celebrate. Vega, still clutching his injured shoulder, smirked. "Well, Captain, we did it. I don't know how, but we did." Riker gave him a tired nod. The victory had cost them more than he wanted to admit. Many good soldiers had died in this mission. Their names would be remembered, but there was no time to grieve. The war was far from over. A beeping sound interrupted the moment. A message from High Command. Riker tapped the console, and the stern face of Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen. Her eyes scanned the battered crew before she spoke. "Captain Riker, your mission was a success. Outpost Theta is destroyed, and the enemy fleet has been crippled. A pause. Then her voice turned cold. But the Gusterians are already mobilizing for retaliation. Their forces from the core systems are moving. They are coming for us. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The Gusterians had underestimated humanity once. Now, they wouldn't make the same mistake. Riker clenched his fists. How long do we have? Hayes exhaled, her face grim. Days. Maybe less. The transmission cut out, leaving only static. The weight of reality settled on the crew. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. Riker turned to his officers. We need to move. Gather the wounded, reload supplies, and prepare for the next battle. This war isn't stopping today. The crew snapped into action, their exhaustion replaced by duty. Repairs began, weapons were restocked, and the dead were honored. There was no time for rest. The enemy was coming. Hours passed. The fleet regrouped at a nearby asteroid field, using the debris to mask their position. Tactical meetings were held, plans were made, but no strategy felt good enough. The Gusterians were stronger, their reinforcements endless. Humanity had won a battle, but could they win the war? In the quiet of the command deck, Riker sat alone, staring at the star-filled void. He had always known war would come. Humanity had pushed into space, built colonies, expanded its reach. The Gusterians saw them as insects, a lesser species daring to challenge the great empire. But humans had something the enemy never understood: the will to fight, no matter the odds. A soft knock broke his thoughts. Lynn entered, her expression unreadable. Sir, the crew is ready. We are awaiting orders. Riker stood, his resolve hardening. Then we fight. He looked out at the endless expanse of space, knowing the enemy was out there waiting. Victory was won today, but the war was not over. And humanity would not stop until it was.